Hello, my name is Michelle Vasquez, and I am a life and goal coach for divorced women.
And I'm Joanna. I'm a life coach, and I help people to reinvent themselves and free themselves from past conditioning. And in this conversation, we want to talk about the challenges that divorced women face before the divorce and also after. So, Michelle, what are the three main struggles, the three main challenges that divorced women face?
Well, it's interesting the way you asked that because we all have different phases and we've all been in a different journey. And what I have come to realize is that my client's journey has been somewhat similar to mine, which is, when you go through a divorce, there's this loss of self. We've lost who we were. Who were we before we got married? Because as you're with somebody, sometimes you tend to evolve. And when you go through a divorce, you end up feeling, a lot of my clients feel lost on who they were, what they like, what they don't like anymore. They don't know where to start. There's this anxiety about finances as well, because now you had someone that was the breadwinner while you were at home, and now you're kind of left to figure out, like, okay, what do I need to do financially so that I am no longer dependent on this person? Because sometimes money tends to bring in control into the relationship, and divorced women, my clients, don't want to be dependent on their exes. So the other thing that has been a big struggle is this loss of skills. Being in, I was in corporate before I got married and during my marriage. And when I got divorced, I didn't even want to apply anywhere because I thought, oh my gosh, I lost all my skills. So that has been a reoccurring theme with the divorced women that I work with. I've lost all my marketability skills and I don't know how to do stuff anymore, which we know is not true.
What have you seen in the process of working with some of your clients? What changes have you seen?
Well, it's fascinating that we work together for 16 weeks. That's what the length of my program with my clients, just because it does take us a while to figure out what is that conditioning that we have, that we evolved into without even knowing. And so it's deconstructing that, figuring out who we are today, what's our situation or point A, and establishing a really clear path to point B. So it's, we tend to say, like, we're in the river of mystery a lot. We're like in the between, and it's uncomfortable, and there's growth, and there's all these beautiful things that could happen. But then there's also this part of, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to drown. This is a river of mystery. It sucks, and especially if you have kids, you don't want to stay there long because you still need to get up, you still need to take them to school, you still need to function. So how you show up and function during that time, it's so essential to you getting to your point B. So a lot of my clients don't like who they became, and now they don't know how to become the next version of themselves, which is what I love about the work that you do, because your clients are figuring out what's that next version of themselves. And I think that's so beautiful. If you start from that point too, you can kind of go back and realize, like, how am I showing up during that river of mystery? How am I being a mom or a wife, or an ex-wife, excuse me, or an employee? If you're employed, how are you showing up to your work when you have all this baggage, from your divorce?
Mm-hmm. So you also talked about how women can lose themselves in a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and then how they have to find themselves and find new identity. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. During my divorce, I wanted to redecorate my place, and I thought, oh my gosh, like, I didn't remember that my favorite color. I knew what my favorite food was, but even that, it was more of like, no, it's whatever, whatever he wanted, whatever worked out, whatever the kids wanted. that to me, to figure out, like, my favorite color is royal blue. I love that color. I love the intensity of it. And but it's and I talk about it like it's something so insignificant, but to me, it was such a big ordeal of like, how could I have lost myself? How we do this without knowing. When we have kids, our schedule kind of depends on them, when they're eating, when they're sleeping, and all of that, right? So if you are married, I was married without kids at the beginning for a few years. Well, we planned everything perfectly, and I never really said like, this is my favorite color and this is what I want to do. It was more of like, sure, yeah, whatever my husband wanted, and it was great. And I was in this bliss that you truly forget, who are you really? Who is like you inside, from what you like, what you don't like. And we end up losing our boundaries. We end up losing ourselves in the roles that we choose to take on. So it's rediscovering that, like, oh, I don't like this. And but doing that work before you get into more relationships, before you go and change more things around.
What do you see stops women from entering the new phase of life, possibly
Mhm,
with a new spouse?
mhm.
What gets in the way?
It's interesting that we think of them entering a relationship with a new person, but we need to, I encourage my clients, and this is the work that we do, of learning to have that new relationship with yourself. You need to figure out what that relationship is with yourself before you can get into a relationship with someone else. And here's a good analogy. The Imagine going on a trip, and you pack your suitcase, you leave some room for souvenirs and little trinkets that you're going to get there, clothes maybe. I love getting clothes from when I travel. And imagine coming home and you have that suitcase, you kind of open it and you're like, yeah, I'm going to unpack later. Then someone comes along and now you're like, hey, let's go on a trip. And, great, let's go. If I never unpack that suitcase, it's kind of like being in from the hurt from that old relationship. And now I'm just buying a new suitcase so that I can take on this new trip, but bringing the other one along. So imagine doing that 1, 2, 3, 5 times that you're in relationships, and they don't have to be intimate. They can be very platonic. I'm going out on a date, but I'm bringing all these filled suitcases with me. Imagine the heaviness that brings on to your, not to your, only to your body, but to your mind and your soul, of like, my gosh, I'm hauling all this luggage all the time. So it's really cleaning up that past, unpacking everything from that relationship, so that you can realize, this is what serves me, this is what I still like, this is what doesn't serve me, this is destroying who I am. Not establishing boundaries, it's one of those. I didn't establish healthy boundaries. So that's a burden, or a luggage, an item in your luggage, that if you don't realize, like, what relationship do I want to have with myself? So when I go out with you, I know what I like. I already have that established. So I think it's definitely one of those really important things of, let's just make peace with the past, clear up the past. We can't change it, right? But understand it in a way that it's going to grow me as a person, and allow me to take that emotional responsibility of like, oh, this is what I did. I don't care what they did. This is what I did. And now I can change it if I want to. So that's and I have one more analogy that I just thought, it was like, I presented it to a client and she had that huge aha moment. And it's kind of like, imagine squeezing lemons, right? You don't, it's like nothing. It doesn't hurt. But if you have a cut and now you're squeezing lemon, now it's going to sting. And it's not the lemon juice, it's not the circumstances that are stinging. It's the fact that there's an old wound there that never healed, and now it's hurting because of the lemon juice. And a lot of times we blame, oh, it's the lemon juice that's irritating. No, it's actually the wound in your hand that hasn't healed that's irritating because of the lemon juice.
Okay, so I want to make it more real for people. So in other words, we were in a relationship and it was bad, and we got triggered in that relationship. The person actually maybe was hurtful and was doing something to trigger us. And maybe we have lower self-esteem and sense of self-worth because of that person. And now we divorce, we break up, and then we immediately move on to the next relationship without doing the mental work, the healing work. And then the next person has all the best intentions, but he happens to say something that triggers you. And now you say things like, all men are alike.
Yes, yes.
And he may completely not be aware of what he did, and he didn't mean it this way, but you brought that suitcase with you.
Yes.
With those burdens and your concept of who you are, you let that innocent comment to hurt you. So in the process of change and reinvention in between relationships, we have to be really honest with ourselves, like you said, about what is it that I need to heal. And we are at our shadow. And every single time we have a negative thought about ourselves, about our worthiness, lack of worthiness.
Yes.
And this is an opportunity. This is always a lie, because we have a chance to change that. Maybe the previous relationship made you feel like you are, I don't know, unworthy or just not good. Not good at relationships, right?
Right.
People say it, I'm not good at relationships. How about you look at the relationship you have with yourself, your thoughts about yourself, your self-concept?
Yes.
Because if you are not good with relationships, maybe that simply means that you do not see yourself as worthy of good relationship. Big question to ask is, before you get into the next relationship or next marriage, would you marry yourself?
I love that question. Yeah.
Are you a good material? Like, are you really entering the relationship thinking, I'm fabulous, I have so much to offer, and yeah, we are going to, have amazing relationship? Because if you are entering the next relationship thinking that it will fix you, that this is something that needs to fulfill you or patch some holes on your self-worth, then it's going to fall apart. You are going to come to the places of hurt again, and then you will come to the conclusion, oh, they are all the same, which they are not.
And it's funny because, when I was younger, I used to hear like, oh, we compliment each other and we're so great with it for each other. And as I started working with my life coach after my divorce, I realized like, oh my gosh, his job was never to compliment me. My job was not to compliment him or fix him or change either one of us. Our job was to, not complete each other. It's like, oh, they complete me. You're not supposed to complete anyone else. Complete yourself. And then you come into that relationship already complete, already fulfilled, that, if you love me, great. And if you don't, then have an amazing day. I love myself. We tend to give a priority to like all the other relationships. If your boss calls in a meeting, if you're, someone that you admire says, hey, I have 30 minutes to talk to you, you're going to get ready. You're going to be there ahead of time. You're going to be prepared for that meeting. Right. But when we say like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to set up time so that I can fill my own cup, we tend to be more relaxed about it. And we tend to be more like, yeah, that's okay. My son needed me, my daughter needed me, or someone needed me, right? And so we honor our time with other people more than we honor it with ourselves, which is why I love like that you are helping people find the next best version of themselves. Who is that? That's someone that knows boundaries. And that applies into like my clients as well. What's that emotional growth that you need to have so that you can have your next best version is not going to be a victim. It's not going to be like, oh my gosh, poor me. He did this to me, but it's going to show up with like, yeah, we just didn't work out.
Sometimes there's this misconception that another person will fulfill us, fulfill our needs.
Yeah.
And what I put into our notes, because I wanted to remember what I want to talk about, is that we delegate. We are delegating our happiness to other people. And sometimes in a marriage, we wait for another person to give us permission or to nudge us into fulfilling our dreams. But the responsibility was on us. The responsibility was to go after our dreams.
Right.
And you know what? I was just going through this book again, Debbie Ford, Spiritual Divorce. And I found this amazing quote. It's a quote from Gary Vaynerchuk, the author of Timeless Wisdom, and Debbie quotes him. Nobody has the right to wreck your day, let alone your life. And guess what? Nobody does. You do. We are each accountable for our own happiness. No one can take it away from us. We give our power away. We give parts of ourselves away. And then we get angry when our partners leave, taking away what we gave them. The harsh truth is that you gave it away. You gave away your power. The other person obviously took it. And this is the moment when we have to learn the boundaries. What are we really ready to give, and learn not to overgive at our own expense.
Yes, absolutely. And we are raised in a society that it's like, oh, don't do this because you're going to hurt their feelings. Oh my gosh. And I remember having this with my own 3 boys. It's like, when you don't say, I love you back, I feel hurt. I feel like you don't love me. And it was so poisonous because, I thought this isn't my life. This isn't who I'm meant to be. I started working with a coach and I started realizing like, and now I can have this conversation with my boys, and they're in their teens, 2 in their teens and 1 is 11, that I can say, you can say and do whatever you want. I love you the same, and I know you love me. And it's not your job. I remember like there was a conversation I had with one of my boys, and he said, I'm sorry that I made you feel bad. And I said, don't be. I said, I'm sorry that I let my emotions get the best of me. You are being you, and it's not your responsibility to make me happy, to say like, oh, well, I want mom to be happy. Then I need to have that growth. I need that opportunity to say like, I don't want to depend on my voice, because then if like, if you're around teens, that they can be really loving one time, in the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's like, you're the devil, and you don't want to depend on someone else's mood. I want to depend on my own mood. So I am going to make sure that I have that, again, emotional growth of saying, my happiness depends on me. People get to be and act how they want, who they are. And if I like it and we work together, great, wonderful. But if we don't, then that's okay, because I got me. And I think that's one of the hardest things to really grasp, of like, really, but you're my, like, let's say an example of like, I'm calling you and you don't return my calls. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad. I'm such a bad friend. And, she's such a bad friend. And, it's probably because I'm not worth it. It's probably because she doesn't consider me a friend. And all of my day I've spent thinking that of, judging who I am because of you not returning my call. You know what I mean? So I I love what we do of empowering women and teaching them, like, if they don't call you, that's okay. Maybe they're not on the same level as of friendship as you think, but how can you still have the life that you want, whether or not someone else is in it?
Mhm. And also, just because somebody doesn't call you within 3 hours, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean anything
Right.
about how much they love you.
Hmm.
Doesn't-
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Okay. There is something that is going on for women before they get a divorce.
Hmm.
And that is the period of time they wait.
Mm.
I don't know why I want to say pull the trigger, but it's not about pulling the trigger. It's
Uh-huh.
about making the decision because it's an irreversible decision. It's a point of no return. The longest period of time I heard somebody waited for divorce was 10 years because she was
Oh.
hoping things will change. She was
Hmm.
working on it. And finally, she reached the point when she simply had to do this because it was a matter of life and death for her soul. This is
Mm.
very often the spiritual reason for change, that you know that you have to get out of this relationship in order to grow, to
Hmm.
evolve. But what is life teaching you in this moment is to be courageous, to make decisions, to not be afraid, and to know that this is not the end of life, that there
Right.
is more for you. And because you are being pulled to something else,
Hmm.
and you feel like you are dying in this relationship, this is simply a sign from your soul. This is your emotions
Hmm.
speaking to you, showing you the way.
Right.
And I remember this one woman that came to me, and we were actually working on something else, her emotional struggle, grief, and so on. And she spent a year basically on the sofa, eating, watching TV, because she was numbing her grief. So she gained
Mm.
some weight. And we did something unusual because I sometimes create custom sessions for my
Hmm.
clients. We created this one big mega session,
Hmm.
and we packed everything there because I wanted to spend 3 hours with her,
Hmm.
working on all those levels of transformation and grief. So we did that. And several months later, she came back for other work, and she told me, after that one session, I let go of that grief
Hmm.
that was so heavy for me.
Hmm.
Filed for divorce within a month from that session.
Wow, that's so
I lost
awesome.
20 pounds, and she did something else, but it was transformative for her. So, but I really think that it's more likely that we will go through the changes over the period of time. For example,
Hmm.
now I have a 12-week transformational program, which is
Hmm.
packed, which is intense. But the reason I was talking about it was because of the period of time we wait. We wait
Hmm.
to make the decision because we hope, and we are waiting for the man's potential to
Hmm.
finally be real. And the man doesn't know about his potential. He is who he is. And then we are disappointed
Right.
because he doesn't fulfill his potential. He is still the
Right.
person who he was, honestly, in his honesty before.
I think women don't realize how much power they give away, to man, to society, to anything, to say, like, oh, I'm going to wait for them to change. I'm going to wait for this. And that maybe there's a chance. And what if you worry about the only person that you can change, which is you? And you start really doing that work, whether or not he changes, she changes, whatever it is, that's okay. That's going to be their journey. It's none of my business when they do that. it's my business if I decide to stay and wait around for them to change, right? But whether or not he's going to change, why am I so focused on him? If he is the problem, then I can start thinking like, how am I reflecting on that problem? And really start owning that, because we don't own our power. We don't own our own authority of, this is how I feel. And I'm sorry you don't like this. And with my husband, we have had that conversation. It's like, this is how I feel. And he could go on and on about like how he meant it. And I said, and that's so beautiful. But this is how I'm feeling. And I can own that. And whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm validating myself because I'm reinforcing the love that I have for me and what my boundary is. And he can do it or not. But if he crosses that boundary, then that's my decision. Do I stick around or do I do something about it? So it's really like this next beautiful version of who our clients are becoming has to be a more empowered, of where you're like, really, you know who you are, you know what you want, you know what you can control. And okay, how do I do this, in a more powerful way?
You also wanted to talk about letting go of the emotions after the divorce.
Mhm.
And what are the emotions? There are grudges, resentments, sometimes anger, a sense of being a
Yes.
victim, right? What else?
Mhm. There's definitely a lot of anger, a lot of like, oh my gosh, how did I not, mine in particular, were like, how did I not see this? I was everybody's fool. Everybody knew. Oh my gosh, there's so much shame and judgment. And, there's shame with like, oh my gosh, what are his family going to say? What are my family going to say? With 3 little boys, I felt like people were judging me for being more selfish than thinking about my kids, because we live in a society, or I was raised to believe that you don't get divorced. You stick it out, for the kids. You do everything for the kids. Now, if you don't have any kids, then you don't have to worry about that. But it's also seen as a failure. And now it's less of a failure, more common to go through divorce. I just want to say, if you're going to get divorced, make sure you fall in love with where you are right now before you decide that that is the way you want to go. If I would have had a life coach, my decision could have been different, but it could have not. So I know I would have saved myself a lot of pain. I'm grateful that I had that growth of like, how do I want to show up for my kids when they get older? And my ex-husband and I would be like at each other's throats, and we would still take the kids out to eat. We would still have family days during the divorce. And now our kids are very level-headed, very emotional. Of course, they're teens, right? But they have a different level of emotional understanding, because we didn't make this about them or about the good and the bad guys. We made this about, this is how it's working out and we're going to make the best. But it was that growth. So it's your original question. It's really letting go of all these expectations and feelings and shame, because every time we feel another emotion, it's like that onion that we're just layering and layering and layering, when the center, the heart of it, it's like, I just didn't love myself to stand up for myself. But now there's this shame. So, okay, now I have to go deal with the shame before I get to me. Now I have to go deal with the judgment, and especially now that we're getting to the holidays, there's this bittersweetness around it of, it's the holidays, it's supposed to be family time, it's supposed to be, we have this beautiful ideas of how life is supposed to be, that we forget to see like, but this is where we are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it could be beautiful and all you want, but this is where we are. And when you get to that place, there's so much peace, and there's so much of like, okay, I can breathe, because it's going to be okay.
What is important is to do the work of self-forgiveness. It's not
Mhm.
completely your fault. It's not your fault. It's simply how life unfolded. So that part of self-forgiveness is truly
Yes.
one of the transformational works that will
Mhm.
lift off most of that heaviness related to divorce. Now, I have another call in like 10 minutes. Somebody wants to work with you, how do they find you?
They can go to my website at www.michelle, Vasquez, Vasquez, coaching.com, or they can find me on Instagram at Michelle_ultimate goal coach, and there's an underscore between each word, or Facebook at Michelle Vasquez or Michelle Vasquez coaching. So it's fascinating. Thank you for this time. Thank you for having this conversation. I think the more we have it, the more we can tell people we can help. You don't have to go through it alone.
What I love about this work also is that people start falling in love with who they are. Thank you so much, Michelle. It was a pleasure. Let's do it
I
again.
loved it. Yes, sounds
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Bye, Joanna.
Bye.